Cheers. Thanks very much, Alison. And thanks very much to Paddy and to John and to Sheena for all their help in putting together this report. This is a difficult week for anybody involved with housing. I'm sure there's other people in the room who've been through, spent some of their time in London, who've been through council housing in London, who've lived in terror blocks like the one we saw at Grenfell Tower and the horrendous tragedy there. I think it's prescient, though, as well, that we have an opportunity to talk about social housing in this context. And there's two things, and Alison's quite right, and we'll have to wait to see exactly what the causes were of the fire and the disaster there. But there were two things I think that really struck me over the week about it. One was, these are poor people. These are poor working class people living in the most affluent borough in these islands. You know, they were workers, they were students, they were immigrants, they were refugees, they were retired people, and basically, I suppose I can say this as I've got a position in the university and I'm a bit independent on it, as far as I can see, they died because they were poor. You know, because the government regulations haven't been updated. The government regulations, when the refurbishments were put in, there isn't the rules there to say that sprinkler systems need to be put in, which seems blindingly obvious. That's one side of things. The other point that I think is really struck me about it is that the context in which the Grenfell Tower disaster occurred is 30, 40 years worth of underfunding, of cuts, deregulations, loosening the bureaucratic red tape, the health and safety gone mad, all this kind of stuff. Right? And then coming up with schemes and ways to actually make financing move off the government's balance sheet. So as we end up with a scenario where we have a tenant management organisation, which of course you have to remember, I was looking online at this last night, that is a private limited company. It's limited by guarantee, but it's a private limited company. And this is where the link between Grenfell Tower and what happened there and what's being proposed in to the housing executive and stock transfer is relevant. Because the housing associations are also private limited companies. Right? And the reason that we have, the sole reason that those tenant management organisations are for sale, the reason we have stock transfer as a policy was because successive governments have refused to fund directly council housing and public housing. Instead, they said, we'll give you the funding, right, or we will underwrite and subsidise the funding if you do an ALMO, if you do a stock transfer. Right? Or in certain cases as well, they've used the even more discredited PFI schemes as well, which have caused some great difficulties in certain states in England. And so this is the context. This is that the government policy has generated, that has given rise to and allowed something like Grenfell Tower to occur. And it's the same whether it's in Westminster, Kensington and Chelsea, or it's here. It's the same overall policy environment. The big difference is, and this is something that we talk about and we try to talk about in the report, is actually Northern Ireland has got a different history for public housing. And the housing executive, as we talked about in the report 4 years ago, has been recognised by people who you would not normally consider to be friends of public services at all, by the likes of, you know, one of the big four accountancy firms, PwC, who recognise the great work that the housing executive has done over 40 years, right, in bringing the condition of the housing stock from in the early 1970s from some of the worst in Western Europe to now best practice, or certainly up until recent years considered to be some of the best conditions. So we've got something different here in relation to the housing executive in Northern Ireland, and it's really, I suppose, the thrust of what we say in the report, and I'll go into some more of the details, is to say, rather than seeing this as a problem, rather than seeing the housing executive as something that needs to be hollowed out, that needs to be reformed, that needs to be privatised or semi-privatised, right? It needs to be marketised in some way. Actually, here's a huge asset that could be used if our politicians had a bit of vision, or were willing to stand up and actually put some funding into it, could be used for enormous social benefits. Right? And when we talk about that social benefits, it's these two statistics going through really strike me. Obviously, everything on the screens in the report as well, and in more detail. But we've got this about the problem, the nature and the size of the housing crisis in Northern Ireland. So we have 18,000, over 18,000 households presented homeless, of which 11,000 were considered to be full duty applicants. So this is a circumstance where we're saying these people are homeless. They're not just, they're homeless through no fault of their own, and there is a responsibility on the state, on the housing executive, to try and house them. But only just over 3,000 were actually housed. So we're in the circumstances where there's only, about 30% of the people who are actually being made homeless each year are being housed. And why is this? Part of the reason is whether we've built enough houses in total is an open question. We certainly haven't built enough social housing. There is not enough social housing in Northern Ireland or in any of the jurisdictions in these islands. And so you can see this very clearly when you go back and you look at some of the history of this. So 1975 there was over 10,000 new homes being built. Right? 60% were built by the housing executive. Right? And of course, remember, this is 1975. All the circumstances we're in at the time, this is a far more wealthy place now than it was 40 years ago. But we were able to build 10,000 homes, 6,000 of which were for social public housing. Right? You get to 2014, we're only able to build 5,700 new homes, and only just over, or just under 600 of them are with the housing associations or social housing. Okay, that's the scale, that's how far we've fallen. And when you consider 1975, you consider now, there is no other reason for it other than the policies, the ideas that have been dominant for the last 30 to 40 years about privatisation, about the private sector is good and everything in the private sector is the way forward and the public sector is bad. And all those arguments and debates that have been going on over that period. So when we look at stock transfer, it's quite interesting. When we look at stock transfer, what is it about? What is it there to do? Right? And basically the overall aim of the stock transfer policy is to take public housing from the housing executive and hand it over to housing associations. And the justification for that, and of course as we talk about, we can, in the discussion afterwards, we can talk more about the nature of housing associations and what's actually happening with them. So, but the reason that they're able to do that is because, actually strangely, the Office for National Statistics are queering the pitch here, if you like, because they've actually said that the housing associations and the housing executive are the same type of organisation. But the original reason was housing associations are considered off-balance sheet. They're a different type of, they're in the private sector. They're not a quasi-public corporation like the housing executive. And because they're in the private sector, they are then allowed to borrow. They don't have to go to the Treasury, although we've never quite been able to get where it's written down that the Treasury says that the housing executive can't borrow. But that's, again, that's something for discussion. Okay, but that's what they're aiming to do. That's why we have the policy. We will take the housing stock, give it over to the housing associations. The housing associations then borrow from the private sector, from banks, or increasingly, and this is some of the other research that I'm doing with some of the big London housing associations, increasingly the housing associations in London are issuing their own corporate bonds are going onto the London Stock Exchange and raising money that way. So there's private money being brought in then, and that private money then can be used to do the maintenance, do the upgrades. Okay? And one of the things that's quite interesting, or really interesting about what the approach so far that the Housing Executive have used is they've actually been very open and transparent, particularly in comparison to some of the tactics and strategies we use in stock transfer campaigns in England, Scotland and Wales. Right? And they've been quite open and transparent and said, we're going to transfer your housing stock over, or we're proposing to transfer your housing stock over. If you agree, your rents are going to go up. And here, this is just from one street. This is the example here. This actually it isn't in the report because the offer document for the transfer that's being pursued at the moment in the Grange estate. This gives you an indication of the levels of increase in rents. So the Housing Executive rent in April 2017, it's about 73, between 73 and 75 pounds per week. Once the work is done, and after it's been transferred over to Choice Housing Association, it's going to go up to between 86 and 88. Okay? So this is not unusual. The other transfers, the transfers that happened at Bloomfield in Bangor and Rinmore in the Cregan, they had similar levels of rent increases. Okay? Now, there's a couple of things to think about in relation to this. One is, I think this is not whoever constructed the policy. Let's put it that way. Right? There is an assumption behind this that actually, as most housing executive tenants are on housing benefit, they're not going to be worried about it because it's not going to impact them at all. Right? Because the housing benefit bill, they don't have to find any additional. Of course, that position may not be very clear actually by the time we get to 2020 and the welfare reforms come in and the local housing cap allowance is capped, and so you end up with a shortfall between what has to be paid to Choice, right, and what you're going to receive with housing benefit. Okay, but even if that is the case, what's happening here is you're having public money in the form of housing benefit going straight from the department, Stormont, into Choice as a private limited company, who are then actually having to pay a portion of that out to the private financiers because they've had to borrow the money from the banks or by issuing bonds. And so we end up with a situation where the state is subsidising private finance at a much, and the reason this is important is because it is much more expensive for Choice to borrow money than it is for the housing executive or indeed the assembly executive government to borrow. So that's one set of arguments. The other set of arguments around this, of course, is actually not everybody is on housing benefit. Depending upon the estates, 20, 30, 40% of the tenants on there will be paying it themselves. So you have tenants that are going to have to find the money themselves to pay those increases. So that, and it seems to me that that's there's a whole series of other arguments as well related to, some of which we go through, related to the accountability of housing associations, related to the way that they're managed, in particular, actually I think we've got on the next slide, yeah, in particular, we've got a table in the report that actually lays out the 3 different tenures if you were renting. If you're renting from the housing executive, if you're renting from a housing association, or if you're in the private rented sector. Okay? And I just brought out the numbers bit here. Now, there is other aspects in there in terms of there's issues about accountability, about how these different tenures are accountable, or who they're accountable to. This, of course, I think is going to be probably the key arguments about what happens in relation to the West London disaster. About actually, the more bodies, you have a tenant management organisation in Kensington and Chelsea, you have the council, you have the London Assembly, you have the central government department. There's 4 different parties who can all point fingers at each other. Okay? The housing executive has a much clearer line of accountability straight up to the department and to the minister, who's then accountable to the assembly and to the population more generally. But then you've got other issues as well about the management ethos. Right? Anybody, and it's quite striking talking to people who work in the housing executive, that they understand the role and the history of the housing executive, what it was there for, the public service that it actually provides. And this is true of all public servants. There's a different ethos in the public service than there is in these semi-privatised or privatised not-for-profit organisations that are seen increasingly as being much more business-like. Now, I'll give you the example. We've been doing this work about bonds being issued by big London housing associations. We did some interviews last summer. Last month, was out to go back to them and talk to 15 of the finance directors and reflect back to them about this is what we've found. About 10 of the 15 didn't say anything about social mission, social objectives. And actually, when it was raised, there was eye-rolling from us. Oh, you see, the problem is, we're developers now. And this is important because that's the future. That's where that section is going. That sector is going. Right? And they increasingly, they see that their finance providers, the people who buy the bonds, they're the ones that they have to be accountable to, not to the tenants. Okay? So you've got issues around accountability, you've got the issues there around public service, you've got public service ethos, repairs responses as well. It's just the fact that the housing executive does a fantastic job in relation to responses to both emergency and urgent repairs. And when you put those numbers up against housing associations, you're going to get a worse service. Now, this sounds like, this is old kind of stuff. Anyone who's been around the public service for a long time, or for a while, will know the arguments about privatisation. Privatisation leads to increasing charges and worsening service. And this is again, we've found the evidence to back that up in relation to the stock transfers. So, this isn't remorselessly negative. That's not what we wanted to do. We wanted to talk about some alternatives. Right? And you can see in section 4 of the report, when we started to look at what other jurisdictions are doing. And actually, this in particular, this first one really surprised me. So some of you may know or may be aware of that actually there's a whole series of devolution deals happening within England, where city regions are being set up and they're being devolved. You get the mayors being set up, so Randy Byrne is elected mayor of Greater Manchester. And with these things, there's all sorts of the usual shenanigans going on. That actually they devolved the NHS budget to Greater Manchester, but they devolved less than the budget was the year before. So all the, a stealthy way of doing cuts. But as part of some of these devolution deals, they've also, the city councils, or the city regions, have been able to negotiate access to funding for housing. Right? So in Manchester now has a 30 million effectively revolving credit facility, revolving loan, to actually stimulate housing and house building in the Greater Manchester area. Okay? And actually, even more significant than that, you can take somewhere like Cambridge City Council. Cambridge City Council has now got 70 million of a housing fund specifically to build council housing. Okay? It's not just about building housing, but specifically for council housing. They were able to negotiate that. This is important because it shows that there are other alternatives that are available. Okay? And again, you can see that in relation to what's been happening in Scotland, different track being taken completely. Right? They stopped the right to buy there because they want to maintain the council housing stock. Because the issue, of course, with the right to buy is not necessarily that you were selling the houses, but they weren't being replaced. Right? So in Scotland, they've stopped that because they don't have the funding to replace them, but they have been able to instigate council house building, public house building, on a scale not seen for a generation, because they've actually looked at the rules in relation to what we were talking about 4 years ago, the prudential borrowing framework. There was extended to local authorities in Northern Ireland in 2011. So that framework allows public bodies, local authorities, to actually borrow, providing it within this prudential framework. There's a series of indicators that they have to go through to make sure that they'll be able to pay the money back. If the local authorities in Northern Ireland are able to do that, why isn't the housing executive? The housing executive is the equivalent of council housing in Britain. Councils in Britain have this borrowing ability using that framework. Why can't it be extended to the housing executive to do? More broadly, though, as well, this is from an annual report about housing in Vienna. And the reason we put Vienna in, and again, this is one of the things that was surprising for me in doing the research for the report. Vienna is seen as a world-leading authority in social housing. Even to this day, so we know what the usual pattern that happened through Europe. There was two big periods of social house building after both world wars. And that the last 40 years has been about actually cutting that back. So that's where right to buy and stock transfer has been about. And there's been a similar pattern that's happened across most of Western Europe. Not in Vienna though. So Vienna got up to 40%, and indeed in Britain it was up to 30% of the total housing stock was council housing. So in Vienna, they got up to 40% after the Second World War. Right? They built thousands, tens of thousands of homes after both World Wars. When you think about what happened to Vienna after the First World War and the Second World War as well, things were not rich places. They were in dire economic straits, but they were still able to build tens of thousands of homes. Right? They got up to that 40% and they maintained it. It is still the most popular tenure in Vienna. 40% of the population live in social housing. Right? And what's important as well about this is that they have an approach here where, with the numbers that they have 10,000, they put this funding aside each year to maintain 10,000 homes. This is more than